and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. U.S. President Donald Trump has said Washington could pull out from Iran in 2 to 3 weeks, adding that it's on other nations to open the Strait of Hormuz. Meanwhile, Iran's president reportedly expressed readiness to end the conflict if given security guarantees. U.S. stocks surged to their best day since last spring on signs of possible de-escalation in the Middle East conflict. The S&P 500 leaped almost 3% on Tuesday for its largest gain in 10 months. President Lee Jae-myung is set to host his Indonesian counterpart, Prabowo Subianto, at the Blue House today. They're expected to discuss strengthening the two countries' special strategic partnership and expanding cooperation in defense, trade, and investment. It's not been more than a month since the launch of Operation Epic Fury, and President Donald Trump says that the United States will be pulling out in 2 to 3 weeks. While still pressuring Iran for a deal, he also says deal is not completely necessary for the military operation to stop as long as denuclearization has been achieved. Our Kim Do-yeon has the latest.
Speaking at the White House on Tuesday, U.S. President Donald Trump signaled a withdrawal of American forces from Iran within weeks as the Pentagon simultaneously ramps up pressure on Tehran to secure a ceasefire agreement.
Excuse me? I think with 2 or 3 weeks,
Not 3 weeks, if it is
we'll leave. And it's very clearly covered.
Trump also added that the U.S. could leave without a deal as long as the U.S. achieves its goal of denuclearizing Iran. And he repeated his claims that Iran is the one that wants a deal.
And they won't be able to come up with a nuclear weapon. Then we'll leave. Whether we have a deal or not, it's irrelevant.
Shortly after this, the White House also announced that at 9 p.m. Wednesday local time, President Trump will address the public on the latest on Operation Epic Fury. According to Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt's ex-post, it's a, quote, an important update on Iran. Despite the timeline for withdrawal, the U.S. Defense Department is maintaining a hardline stance to force an agreement. Following a visit to U.S. Central Command, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth stated that American firepower is increasing while Iran's capabilities are degrading.
This new regime, because regime change has occurred, should be wiser than the last. President Trump will make a deal he is willing. And the terms of the deal are known to them. If Iran is not willing, then the United States War Department will continue with even more intensity.
Meanwhile, Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi confirmed that he is exchanging direct messages with U.S. Special Envoy Steve Witkoff. However, Araghchi said that these back-channel communications do not constitute formal negotiations. Simultaneously, Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian has signaled a conditional willingness to de-escalate. He stated that Tehran is prepared to end the conflict, provided there are concrete guarantees against any further attacks on Iranian soil. Pezeshkian said that Iran had previously engaged in good faith, calling recent military actions by the U.S. and Israel a violation of international law. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
And U.S. President Donald Trump is facing growing resistance from NATO allies over his push for military action against Iran, exposing deepening divisions within the alliance. As countries refuse airspace access and military support, President Trump is warning longtime partners they may have to defend themselves without U.S. backing. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
Tensions are rising between the United States and other NATO members as U.S. President Donald Trump pushes allies to support military action against Iran, but key partners are resisting. Several European countries have taken concrete steps to distance themselves from the conflict. Spain has closed its airspace to U.S. military aircraft, while Italy denied permission for American planes bound for the Middle East to land at a base in Sicily. Poland has also rejected U.S. suggestions to relocate its Patriot air defense systems, emphasizing that its current deployments are critical to national security. President Trump responded sharply on social media on Tuesday, criticizing allies for what he described as a lack of support. He singled out France for refusing to allow U.S. military supply flights to pass through its airspace, writing that the U.S. would remember the decision. Trump also warned both France and the United Kingdom that Washington may reconsider its security commitments if allies continue to stay out of the conflict. In a series of posts, he also accused allies of failing to contribute while benefiting from U.S. support. The president went further, urging countries affected by disruptions in the Strait of Hormuz to take matters into their own hands. He called on nations like the UK to secure their own energy routes, suggesting they go to the strait and take it. The Strait of Hormuz remains a critical global oil choke point, and ongoing fighting has significantly disrupted supply flows. Trump claimed Iran has already been largely weakened, saying the hard part is done, and urged allies to act independently moving forward. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
U.S. stocks surged on Tuesday to hit its best day since last spring on signs of possible de-escalation in the Iran conflict after the Iranian president signaled openness to negotiations that could help end the war. Markets were already higher after President Donald Trump reportedly told administration officials that the conflict may end soon, without the need to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. The rally accelerated through the session, with the S&P 500 rising 2.9% for its largest gain since May. The Dow Jones Industrial Average gained 2.5%, or more than 1,000 points. The Nasdaq led the advance, jumping 3.8% as major tech stocks rallied. President Lee Jae-myung has called on his cabinet to adopt a more proactive approach to protect the local economy from the conflict in the Middle East. During a cabinet meeting on Tuesday, he also floated the possibility of invoking an emergency economic decree. Our Blue House correspondent Song Yoo-jin reports.
As the conflict in the Middle East continues, President Lee Jae-myung has called for bolder measures to address potential energy supply disruptions in South Korea.
대외 의존도가 높고 중동 지역으로부터의 에너지 수급 비중이 큰 우리 입장에서는 더더욱 철저한 점검 그리고 치밀한 비상 대책이 요구됩니다.
Presiding over a cabinet meeting on Tuesday, Lee even raised the possibility of using an emergency presidential decree if legal or regulatory barriers slow the government's response.
수입 규제 또 심사 절차가 법에 정해져 있어서 도저히 어쩔 수가 없다 이런 상황이 발생하면 그런 것들도 다 모아 가지고 오세요. 우리 헌법에 그런 거 있잖아요. 그 긴급 재정 경제 명령이라고.
This emergency order allows the president to take immediate action with the force of law in the event of a serious economic crisis. Any such measure must later receive approval from the National Assembly. It was last invoked in 1993 when the government introduced a real name financial transaction system. Lee's remarks come as the government looks for alternative supply routes following the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, through which around 2/3 of South Korea's crude oil imports pass. The president also pushed back against claims that the situation in the Middle East could trigger a rise in the price of everyday essentials, particularly garbage bags. The bags are made from polyethylene, which is produced using naphtha refined from crude oil.
생산 원가는 보통 몇 원에 불과한데 그걸 몇십 원, 100원씩, 200원씩 이렇게 받잖아요. 그 이유는 행정 처리 비용을 조달하기 위한 일종의 세금 비슷한 것이어서 조례로 정하고 있잖아요. 마음대로 부족하다고 올려받지도 못하고.
He instructed officials to respond firmly to the spread of such misinformation, calling it a, quote, serious crime causing unnecessary confusion at a time of crisis.
As part of efforts to cushion the economy from the fallout of the Iran war, the cabinet on Tuesday approved the government's supplementary budget proposal, worth 26.2 trillion Korean won, or roughly $17.1 billion. The proposal now heads to the National Assembly for review and passage. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
South Korea's exports reached an all-time high in March, hitting $86.1 billion. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy said this morning that exports surged 48.3% on year to set the 10th straight monthly record in exports. This comes despite March being overshadowed by concerns over the conflict in the Middle East, which impacted the overall economy with rising crude oil prices. The export surge was heavily driven by the semiconductor sector. Chip exports reached a record monthly high of $32.8 billion. The growth is backed by skyrocketing memory chip prices, with fixed prices for key DRAM and NAND products jumping between 600 and 860% compared to the same period last year. Meanwhile, imports in March rose 13.2% on year to $60.4 billion. This resulted in a trade surplus of $25.7 billion. And now for more on how energy disruptions due to the conflict in the Middle East are taking a toll on Korean businesses. We're joined today by Professor Park Min-jung, professor at the Department of Business Administration at Kumo National Institute of Technology. Professor Park, thanks for coming on today.
Hey, thank you for having me today.
So I'm hearing energy and supply chain disruptions are impacting a wide range of industries, not just oil and gas, but also shipbuilding, steel, and biotech. How serious is it for businesses right now?
Yeah, the twin shock of energy supply chain disruptions is imposing not only a short-term impact, but also a structural burden on the Korean economy. Unlike in the past, these challenges are now spreading across industries due to volatile energy prices and the ongoing reconfiguration of global supply chains. Shipbuilding and steel are directly affected by rising costs, while biotech faces indirect pressures from global sourcing dependencies. At the same time, logistics disruptions and geopolitical risks are intensifying pressures on businesses, leading to higher costs, delays, and reduced profitability. However, this should not be viewed solely as a crisis. As supply chain becomes more regionalized, Korean firms are being pushed to diversify supply sources, improve energy efficiency, and strengthen risk management. So the overall it means that finally, while the short-term impact is now significant, this shock may also drive structural transformation and enhance long-term competitiveness.
I see. And the Korean won against the dollar dropped to its lowest level since the 2009 financial crisis. How is this impacting the Korean economy?
Now, the Korean won's depreciation to its lowest level since the 2009 financial crisis, having mixed but predominantly negative impacts on the economy. On the positive side, export-oriented industries such as semiconductors, automobiles, and shipbuilding may gain some price competitiveness in global markets. However, the downside pressures are more significant. Korea relies heavily on imported energy raw materials, so weaker won directly increases import costs, leading to higher production expenses and inflationary pressures. This reduces real purchasing power for households and compressed profit margins for farms. In addition, the weakening currency raises concerns about financial market volatility and potential capital outflows, which could further tighten financial conditions.
Right, and the Korean government is ready to roll out a supplementary budget for households in the bottom 70% of the income bracket in the country. Do you think this will help cushion the economic shock from the Middle East conflict?
Now, the supplementary budget targeting the bottom 70% of households can provide short-term relief, but its effectiveness in cushioning the broader economic shock from the Middle East conflict will likely be limited. On the positive side, direct cash support can help stabilize household consumption, especially among lower and middle income groups who are more vulnerable to rising energy prices and inflation. This can prevent a sharp contraction in domestic demand and provide a temporary buffer for the economy. However, the current shock is largely driven by external factors, such as energy prices, volatility, and global supply disruptions, which physical transfers alone cannot fully offset. And in addition, the one-off nature of the support means its impact may fade relatively quickly without addressing underlying structural vulnerabilities. Therefore, while the supplementary budget is now a useful short-term stabilization tool, it should be complemented by broader measures such as energy cost management, supply chain diversification, and targeted support for affected industries to effectively mitigate the overall economic impact.
Right, and before I let you go on interest rates, financial markets have raised bets on a U.S. Fed rate hike this year. After the Fed chair said the central bank can wait and see how the Iran war affects inflation, how might this shift impact the global economy and the Bank of Korea's decision on its key interest rates? That's scheduled for next week on April 10th.
The shift in market expectations from pricing rates hikes to a wait-and-see stance signals a broader rise in global uncertainty. The Fed's cautious approach reflects the difficulty of responding to supply-driven shocks like energy price spikes caused by the Iran conflict. For the global economy, these imply two key effects. First is that financial conditions may temporarily ease as expectations of further tightening decline. However, at the same time, high energy prices and supply disruptions are likely to push inflation up while slowing growth, raising concerns about stagflation risks. For the Bank of Korea, the decision becomes more complex. On one hand, reduces pressure from U.S. rate hikes gives the Bank of Korea more flexibility to hold or even consider easing. But on the other hand, Korea faces rising import costs, currency volatility, and inflation pressures from the energy shock. Therefore, the most likely scenario is a cautious pause. The Bank of Korea will likely prioritize financial stability and inflation control while closely monitoring external risks rather than making an aggressive policy move.
I see. I guess we'll have to see how that goes. All right, Professor Park, thank you so much for your insight this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
President Lee Jae-myung is set to host his Indonesian counterpart, Prabowo Subianto, at the Blue House for talks on cooperation in a wide range of areas. The summit will be followed by the signing of MOUs and a state lunch. The leaders are expected to discuss bolstering their two countries' special strategic partnership and expanding this in the trade, investment, and defense industries, as well as the AI and nuclear energy sectors. Also on the agenda is regional and global security, including the Middle East war. The Indonesian president is on a 3-day state visit to South Korea. He last visited the country in October for the APEC leaders meeting. There is a special exhibition at Kansong Art Museum, Daegu, where artificial intelligence has been integrated with the traditional Korean art piece, Portrait of a Beauty. What would this piece look like in the styles of Western masters like Monet and Rembrandt? Our Ian Jin has the story.
A research team from the Daegu Gyeongbok Institute of Science and Technology has used AI to reinterpret Korean traditional art through the eyes of Western masters. The voluminous braided hair and enigmatic gaze of Shin Yun-bok's Portrait of a Beauty is often dubbed the Mona Lisa of Joseon. But in this variant of the work, the jagged lines and use of muted colors closely resemble the style of Western master Egon Schiele. And in this edition, a sense of three-dimensionality is added, showing Rembrandt's style of dramatic use of light and shadow.
The light and shadow compositions became significantly more dynamic. It became more three-dimensional, and it was interesting to see how the atmosphere shifts accordingly.
An exhibition at Kansong Art Museum, Daegu also showcases the flip side, where Western masterpieces are converted into the style of Shin Yun-bok. Also popular at the exhibition is an interactive booth that transforms visitors' faces into art, and a moving AI version of Portrait of a Beauty. While there were concerns regarding the modification of the original work, The focus was placed on providing a new and enjoyable artistic perspective.
I believe art should always present something new to the audience. If we can provide a new experience for visitors without damaging the original work, I thought it was a challenge worth taking.
This exhibition will run until May 31st. And following this special exhibition, Kansong Art Museum Daegu plans to open a dedicated hall for Portrait of a Beauty in July. 이은진, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is The World Now. Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps has threatened to destroy American tech and defense company facilities across the Middle East. The IRGC, in a statement released on Tuesday by the government-backed Tasnim news agency, named 18 U.S. companies for what it calls active participation in terrorist plots. The list of companies include Microsoft, Google, Apple, Meta, Nvidia, Palantir, and Boeing. The IRGC ordered people within 1 kilometer of those facilities to evacuate immediately and said strikes could begin as early as Wednesday evening. This follows a confirmed Iranian drone strike on March 3rd that knocked out Amazon Web Services cloud facilities in the UAE and Bahrain. A White House official told reporters the U.S. military stands fully prepared to stop any Iranian attack, citing a 90% drop in missile and drone strikes since the war began. Pakistan and China have issued a 5-point joint initiative demanding an immediate ceasefire in the Gulf and the restoration of safe shipping through the Strait of Hormuz. The two foreign ministers met in Beijing on Tuesday as Iran-backed strikes continue to rattle the region and global energy markets, pushing average U.S. gas prices past $4 a gallon for the first time in nearly 4 years. Meeting in Beijing, the two foreign ministers put forward a 5-point initiative calling on every party to commit to diplomacy as the only path forward, protect civilians and civilian infrastructure, and respect the sovereignty of Iran and Gulf nations, including Iran's peaceful nuclear facilities. Pakistan, which shares a 900-kilometer border with Iran, is emerging as a key mediator in the conflict, leveraging ties with both Washington and Tehran. China's Foreign Minister Wang Yi welcomed Pakistan's role, saying Beijing stands ready to help end fighting and create an opening for peace talks. In the U.S., a federal judge on Tuesday blocked President Trump's $400 million White House ballroom project, ruling that no U.S. law gives a sitting president the authority to demolish and replace a historical building without an explicit act of Congress. U.S. District Judge Richard Leon granted an injunction halting the 90,000-square-foot project while the lawsuit by the National Trust for Historic Preservation proceeds. Trump took to social media to call the preservation group, quote, left-wing lunatics. He insisted the ballroom is under budget, ahead of schedule, and costs taxpayers nothing. The Justice Department filed an appeal within hours of the ruling. NASA is counting down to a Wednesday evening launch, which will send humans around the moon for the first time in 53 years. 3 American and 1 Canadian astronaut will depart the Kennedy Space Center in Florida on a 10-day mission aboard the Orion capsule on a mission that takes them deeper into space than any crew in history. Forecasters put conditions at 80% favorable, with the rocket ready on the launch pad.
On this first day of April, spring is in full swing with mild temperatures and passing rain across the country. Showers that began this morning in Jeju and the south coast will spread to eastern regions by the afternoon. And Jeju Island can expect 5 to 20 millimeters of rainfall, and the other regions can see 5 to 10 millimeters. Meanwhile, warming trend will continue today with temperatures staying way above seasonal average. So cherry blossom monsoons in Seoul are expected to reach full bloom by the end of this week. And there is a chance the dust level will rise in western regions during the day. And this afternoon, Seoul will be under cloudy skies with a high of 17 degrees Celsius. Gwangju, Busan topping out at 17 as well. Daegu will make it to 16 degrees Celsius. Looking ahead, daytime highs will stay near 20 degrees, but large day-to-night temperature swings will continue, and another round of rain is expected nationwide on Saturday.
And now we continue our coverage with a special edition of Arirang News. The president of Indonesia is currently in South Korea for a 3-day visit. And in just a few moments, we will bring you live coverage of the official welcoming ceremony ahead of the summit between Presidents Lee Jae-myung and Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto. And while we wait for that to begin, we're joined today by Dr. Bambang Rianto, professor at the Department of Malay-Indonesian Studies at Hankuk University of Foreign Studies. Professor Rianto, thanks for coming on today.
Thank you for having me.
So how significant is the Indonesian president's visit to South Korea?
So I think Indonesian president visit to South Korea is very good strategic for our country to strengthen our partnership between Indonesia and Korea, especially in the defense program partnership. Yeah.
Right. And you just talked about partnership, and a lot of attention is on what the two leaders will discuss regarding the KF-21 development program. To give our viewers some background, why did South Korea and Indonesia decide to cooperate on that issue in the first place?
Yeah, honestly, this is not my field, but as I know, the program is talking about Indonesia and Korea want to join to build some fighter jet, and they together will be increase about the defense partnership in the future. So when Indonesia also will be a huge market from Korea in the domestic from the military product from Korea. So that's the background of the KF-21 programs.
Right, and how might this issue, this KF-21 partnership, be addressed in today's meeting?
Yeah, I think President Prabowo Subianto visit to Korea is to make sure the cooperation runs well. So it is reported that Indonesia will buy around 60 fighter jets in this program, and in the return, Indonesia will receive technology transfer from the Korea. So my president is a commitment strengthened about this program to visit this meeting today.
And why is defense cooperation with Indonesia so important for South Korea? Because especially we're at a time of great geopolitical uncertainty with the conflict going on in the Middle East and war going on in Ukraine.
Indonesia has been a strategic partner for South Korea is many years ago. So we are old friends, and Indonesia have a good location, strategic location in the Southeast Asia, and if the Korea and Indonesia have some partnership in the defense program, it will be good for both countries, especially in the defense military system.
Right, and it will also help, enhance defense cooperation with other Southeast Asian countries too, right?
Yeah, this is Middle East Asia country. Of course, in this today, we know with the America and Iran's war, it's good if we can increase our defense. So, if Indonesia and Korea have a make good deal, so it will be bring stability in the Southeast Asia.
Right. And Seoul is reportedly aiming to sign a deal to export 16 units of KF-21 fighter jets to Indonesia while the Indonesian president is visiting Seoul. How might this influence defense cooperation with other Southeast Asian countries?
Yeah, as I say, I think it's good news, it's positive news, because in today's global security situation, countries need to strengthen their defense. Cooperation between Indonesia and Korea can also support regional stability in Southeast Asia. When two countries work closely like this, it can create trust and encourage other countries in South Asia to cooperate more.
And I understand the two countries established diplomatic relations in 1973. How have diplomatic ties between South Korea and Indonesia evolved so far?
Right now, you mean?
Right, since 1970.
Yes, since 1997, the relationship between Indonesia and South Korea, I think, is growing very strongly over the time. So now, it's not only about diplomacy. I think Indonesia want to make some very engagement relationship for Korea. So it's like, in the simple way, I want to talk. The relationship between Indonesia and Korea is like brotherhood, not just only a friend.
Right, and especially because it's so important for middle power countries to cooperate together in a time like this, right?
Yes, that's very important.
Right, and the two leaders last met at last year's APEC meeting in Gyeongju, where they discussed forming a special strategic partnership. Could you just tell us more about what this partnership entails?
Yes, special strategic partnership means a lot. It means Indonesia want to be a good partner from Korea. So it's not just only diplomacy, but it is about more than that. It's about friendship, side by side, to growing other country together in the future, sharing the prosperity. So it's mean Korea has been a very, very special country to make a partnership with Indonesia.
Right, and the summit today will definitely be able to help strengthen that relationship, right?
Yeah, to strengthen our relationship. Yeah.
I see. How might today's meeting sort of shape future relations between South Korea and Indonesia?
Yeah, this meeting between Indonesia president and the Korea president show a strong long-term commitment to defense partnership, as we know. So Indonesia is developing country and also needs strong partner like South Korea to continue to grow.
And as for economic ties, major Korean companies like Hyundai have already expanded into Indonesia, and more firms are looking to enter the Indonesian market. Why is Indonesia such an attractive market for South Korean businesses?
Yeah, because, as I say, Indonesia is a very large country. We have nearly 300 million people, and that's make Indonesia a huge market. And then by 2045, Indonesia will have a strong young population. We call it generasi emas or golden generation, which supports economic growth. I think this is also one reason why many young Korean or many countries want to work with Indonesia, especially in the economic sector. And I think it's also one reason too, that's why many young Koreans are interested to study about Indonesia in my university, in the Hankuk University of Foreign Studies.
I see. So a lot of students are interested in learning Indonesian language, right?
Yes. So many students want to learning about not only the language but the culture. So they want to understand Indonesia market, Indonesia economic, Indonesia landscape, Indonesia social culture, something like that.
I see. So how is Indonesian culture so different from the Korean culture?
It's not too different because we are Asia, we are Southeast Asia, but in some way we have the different things is about maybe food, traditional and literature, something like that.
Right, Indonesia is especially popular for its food, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Right, and how are, going back to the economic ties, how are these two countries planning to cooperate on critical minerals?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because Indonesia have a resource, very big resource in nickel, and I read the news. Company from Korea is also get the partnership to Indonesia to make nickel to be a battery electrical vehicle. So maybe the company is LG. Yeah, LG will make some partnership with Indonesia to make our nickel to be a battery to vehicle electricity.
Right, and that's especially important at a time like this, especially when we have disruptions in energy and supply chains, right?
Yeah, we have, especially in the Middle East, what happened in the Middle East, so we have a crisis, mineral, energy, so I think it's good time for Indonesia and Korea to make some deal in the sector, mineral sector.
And what might be some other key areas that the two countries are seeking to expand in terms of economic cooperation?
I think trade, long-term investment, and electric vehicle will continue to play an important role in our relationship between Korea and Indonesia. So I think vehicle manufacturer now already Indonesia, like Hyundai, Kia, they build a manufacturer in Indonesia and make a electric vehicle. So I think it's very important for economic growth.
Right, because like we just talked about, a lot of Korean companies are trying to enter the Indonesian market. And as for people-to-people exchanges and culture, how is Korean culture viewed in Indonesia? Is K-pop or K-dramas popular in Indonesia?
Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, we know culture wave though is very famous around the world. Yeah, and in Indonesia, we have so many fan base, K-pop and K-drama. Also, my wife watching K-drama a lot. So she like Lee Min Ho,
Oh,
so that when BTS or Blackpink visiting Indonesia, young people in Indonesia is getting crazy. It's very excited. So I think that's very popular. It's called culture, Korean culture in Indonesia. So it's good for the market of industry creative in the future.
And we talked about Indonesian culture and how young Korean people are trying to learn the Indonesian culture and the Indonesian language. So are these young Koreans trying to get a job in Indonesia?
Yeah, I think they may have, in the future, they may want to live in Indonesia, to get a job in the Korean company, especially in Indonesia, like LG, Hyundai, Kotra, because we know Korean industry in Indonesia is growing so fast. A lot of manufacturing now, not only in Jakarta, they spread in other countries like Semarang, Surabaya, also Medan. So in any sector, property, manufacture, mineral, and industry creative, cosmetic. So that's why young people in Korea is very interesting about Indonesia market in the future.
I see.
Yeah.
And I understand there is a sizable Korean community already in Indonesia, and that travel between the two countries is soaring, right?
Yeah. There is just people. I read the news. People from Indonesia, can go to Korea without visa in the 5 traveling group. Yeah. So I think that's a good step to make strengthen our partnership in the culture and exchange people. I hope when the partnership is growing, we have good trust. Many people in Indonesia can go to Korea maybe without visa. So it's more easy. Korea go to Indonesia, Indonesia go to Korea.
Right, right. And there is a sizable, there are many Koreans living in places like Jakarta, right?
So many, not only Jakarta as I say, they spread it. Semarang, Surabaya. Many students in Hankook University have family in Surabaya, in Semarang. Some students too have a brother, have a sister, live in Jakarta, live in Indonesia. So Bali, of course. And they have some business, run business, restaurant, travel agent, something like that. So many people Korea not only live in Jakarta, but also in our city. Yeah.
I see, I see. That's very impressive. And we're still waiting for this welcoming ceremony to begin. And back to defense cooperation between these two countries. The KF-21 fighter jet partnership will be the highlight of today's meeting, right?
Yeah, KF-21's program is very important for Indonesian defense. As I say, Indonesia want to have a good military system, and they have a good partner with the Korean, and Korea will send 16 military jet, and as the return, Indonesia will have the knowledge about the military system.
Right, right, and that will help advance defense cooperation with other Southeast Asian countries too, right?
Yeah, Asian country will be engaged if Indonesia and Korea can make a deal. Maybe Southeast country will be joined together.
Right, and right. Just to give our viewers some background, could you just explain again why South Korea and Indonesia have decided to cooperate on developing this KF-21 fighter jet together?
You mean is why South Korea want to be?
Why these two countries have decided to cooperate on this KF-21 fighter jet program? Because South Korea has the technology and South Korea doesn't have. It would be best for both countries to cooperate together to make a better fighter jet, right?
Yeah, it's good because we, as I say, Indonesia very huge market, but we don't have a good technology to make some jet military, a good one jet. But Korea can make a good military jet, but they don't have any market, not large market. So I think it's mutual benefit between Indonesia and Korea to make this defense program in the future.
Right. So South Korea has the technology, and Indonesia has the defense market.
Correctly.
So by cooperating together, it would be in their best interest to cooperate this KF-21 fighter jet together, right?
Yes, correctly. So.
I see, and we've been talking about how Korean companies have already expanded into Indonesia and how more companies are trying to enter this market. So could you just explain why the Indonesian market is such an attractive place for South Korean businesses? Yeah,
Indonesia have more population, and also we have a very, very large country. And the city now is growing fast, not only to Jakarta. So our economy, we still have economic problem, but I think we have many population to grow the economic. Young people, generasi emas, golden generation, it will be happen in the 2045 years. 2045, yeah, and that's why Indonesia is very good market for not only Korea but in the Southeast Asia.
Right, and another issue that these two presidents are probably going to address today is cooperation on critical minerals, right?
Yeah, critical mineral, it will be main issue today because we know we have some tough with the mineral because American-Iran war. Yeah, that's why not only Indonesia and Korea to focus in this issue, but I think it will be good if South Asia to make some issue together. So mineral crisis, it will be yeah, you know, it will be good in the future.
Right, and these two countries are trying to expand economic cooperation in other fields like trade and investment too, right?
Trade and investment, of course, this will be good things. And since 1978, Indonesia have good partnership with
1973.
Yes, with Korean, and like you say in the 2017, Indonesia say Korea is special strategic partnership. This means we work together not only in the diplomacy, not only in defense, but in many sectors: culture, industry, creative, manufacture, all.
Right, and you also mentioned how a lot of your Korean students are trying to learn the Indonesian language and the Indonesian culture. So how are these two countries planning to further expand people-to-people exchanges?
Yeah, my student now have a exchange student. When student in Korea study culture and language in university in Indonesia like Universitas Gadjah Mada and Universitas Indonesia. So I think it's good step for us.
I see. Oh, that's very impressive. And on the screen, we now see President Lee Jae-myung and Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto. We see President Lee Jae-myung on the screen now stepping up to the podium to greet the Indonesian President Prabowo Subianto. So, Professor Wianto, how significant is this visit, is the Indonesian President's visit to South Korea?
Yeah, of course, it's very important. Yeah, it's very, very important to Prabowo visit. This is the second one, our president going to Korea before 4 months.
Right, at the APEC summit.
Yeah, APEC summit. Yeah, this is the second one.
Right.
And especially, this is only for not defense program partnership, but they will increase in the many sector.
Right, there's a lot on the agenda, including, defense and economic ties, like you just mentioned, as well as culture and people-to-people exchanges. So, to just give you a brief overview, these two leaders last met during the APEC leaders meeting in October in Gyeongju. And today's summit is expected to focus on strengthening Seoul and Jakarta's special strategic partnership, particularly on defense cooperation, as Indonesia is one of South Korea's major arms export partners. So, Professor Wianto, could you just explain what this special strategic partnership entails?
Strategic partnership between Indonesia and Korea today is about defense partnership. Key 21 program with start many years ago, and we have many change because of regional situation and international situation. But today, our president will make sure Key 21 program is runs well. Our president will get a good deal with President of Korea. So I think the meeting today is very, very important for our defense program.
Right. And they'll also definitely address cultural issues, right? How we just talked about how Korean culture is so popular in Indonesia. How popular exactly is K-pop and K-dramas in Indonesia?
Yeah, K-pop and K-drama is very, very popular in Indonesia. Many young people is getting crazy when artists from Korea come to Indonesia. The ticket is always sold out For example, when Lisa Blackpink going to Jakarta,
Right.
they trying Indonesian food, and it's going viral. So because of that, many people in the world know nasi goreng and rendang. Because of what? Because Lisa Blackpink try rendang at that moment. So I think it's good for our country, not only for Korea. Indonesia is get the things.
Right, right. That's why cultural exchange is so important in diplomatic relations.
Yeah.
So, to give our viewers a brief background, these two leaders last met during the APEC leaders meeting in Gyeongju in October in South Korea, and today's summit is expected to focus on strengthening Seoul and Jakarta's special strategic partnership, particularly on defense cooperation, as Indonesia is one of South Korea's major arms export partners, and a lot of attention is on how they might address the issue of exporting KF-21 fighter jets, as the two countries have been collaborating on a joint defense initiative to develop this aircraft. So, Professor Rianto, so this defense cooperation with Indonesia will also help expand ties with other Southeast Asian countries too, right?
Yeah. Southeast Asia is very, very strategic for world. So I think we need to make some good partnership in the South Asia country, especially between Indonesia and Korea. If we can make a partnership, I think many countries in South Asia will be joined together. It's good if we start now, especially in the defense program, because in this time, in the war time, we need together to handle it.
Right. Ceremony is underway, and we see on the screen President Lee Jae-myung and President Subianto walking side by side. So President Lee Jae-myung and President Subianto will hold talks at the Blue House for talks on cooperation in a wide range of issues, including defense and trade. And today's summit will be followed by the signing of MOUs and a state lunch. They are expected to discuss bolstering their two countries' special strategic partnership and expanding this in many areas, including trade, investment, and defense industries, as well as the artificial intelligence and nuclear energy sectors. Also on the agenda is regional and global security, including the Middle East war that's happening between the United States, Israel, and Iran. The Indonesian president is currently on a 3-day state visit to South Korea. He last visited the country in October for the APEC leaders meeting. So, Professor Rianto, so they will hold a summit very soon. How will today's talks help elevate diplomatic relations between these two countries?
You mean in the future?
Right.
Yeah, in the future, yeah. Today, our president visiting Korea and meet the president of South Korea. Of course, we hope president of South Korea will be going to Indonesia to meet our president and talking with investment, talking with people-to-people exchange. So it will be good to make a build trust and make a build strong partnership between two countries. Yeah, this time my president visit Korea, but I hope someday president of South Korea will go to Jakarta.
Right, definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So we see President Lee Jae-myung and Indonesian President Subianto shaking hands with officials from both countries, with President Lee Jae-myung welcoming his Indonesian counterpart ahead of this summit. And this official welcome, after this official welcoming ceremony is over, we will see them holding talks on cooperation in a wide range of areas, including defense, trade, and investment, as well as artificial intelligence and nuclear energy sectors. Also on the agenda is regional and global security, including the Middle East war. And their visit, this talks comes as the Indonesian president is on a 3-day state visit to South Korea after he last visited the country in October for the APEC leaders meeting. And today's summit will be followed by the signing of MOUs and a state lunch. So, Professor Subianto, we've been talking about how cultural exchange is so important in diplomatic relations as well as economic ties. How are these two countries planning to expand cultural and people-to-people exchanges?
Yeah, I think we can start for the education. Let's that I say student exchange, it will be GATE and also G2G program, when we have many people with good skill, and Korea have manufacturing, so people in Indonesia can going to Korea with the G2G program, when our people get a job in Korea.
Right. And that's exactly why so many young Koreans are trying to learn the Indonesian language. And I assume that a lot of young people in Indonesia are planning to learn the Korean language as well, right?
Yeah. In the Hankook University of Foreign Study, we have a department Malay in Indonesia, established maybe in the 1943, 1946 or 47, I forget, but the start is department Indonesia, and in the past, it will be department Malay in Indonesia. So we have so many students and very interesting talking about Indonesian culture, want to learn Indonesian language, want to know what is literature of Indonesia, and I think it's very impressive, to our program.
Right, absolutely. So we just saw President Lee Jae-myung and President Prabowo Subianto meet at the Blue House main garden. So Professor Subianto, how do you think today's talks will play out?
Yeah, I think it's good. It's amazing, to see our president meet President of South Korea. I hope in the future, Indonesia, Korea make a good partnership, strengthen partnership, not only as a friend, but I hope it will be brother, side by side, and bring prosperity to our country.
Right. We'll have to see how the summit plays out today.
Oh yeah, thank you.
So, Professor Subianto, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
And now that's all we have for this special edition of Arirang News. We'll be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.